again, guys, for joining us for our Preparing for Turkey Season virtual class tonight. I'm Chris Hearn, West Tennessee field rep for the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, and I've hunted turkeys here in Tennessee for about 20 years in different parts of the country, and I'm looking forward to sharing some tips and tricks with you guys tonight. Also joining me tonight is Taylor Martin. He's the manager of the Hunting and Fishing Academy. Taylor, would you like to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about the Zoom functions and the layout for tonight's class?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And like Chris said, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. We really appreciate y'all tuning in to learn a little bit about turkey hunting. We hope everybody leaves here with a little bit more knowledge than what they came in with. But tonight, I'm kind of working as your IT guy, and we'll be helping Chris get questions that everybody has. But born and raised here in Tennessee, just recently started turkey hunting. So I'm pretty excited about it. I've been learning a lot from Chris through these webinars. So I think there's something for everybody here. So hopefully everybody learns something new. But tonight, as you all know, we're using Zoom. We can't see y'all or hear y'all. Y'all are on mute. But the best way to ask your questions will be with the Q&A function at the bottom toolbar. If you have any questions that you want me and Chris to answer, just type it in there and we'll be able to see it. That's the best way to make sure we answer all the questions as they come up. But if you have anything that you'd like to say to us or other participants, you can use the chat function. You can choose whether to send it to me and Chris, who are the panelists, or send it to all the attendees so they can see it. But once again, we really appreciate y'all spending this Tuesday evening with us, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Taylor. So I want to start off by telling you a little bit about the Tennessee Wildlife Federation and what it is we do. The Federation was founded in 1946 and is one of the largest and oldest nonprofits dedicated to the conservation of and sound management of Tennessee's great outdoors. The Federation brings together and represents the various interests of hunters, anglers, wildlife watchers, and other outdoors enthusiasts. Common sense conservation policy is at the heart of the Federation, and we represent various stakeholders on Capitol Hill. Through its habitat conservation program, the Federation is restoring and conserving thousands of acres of wildlife habitat. And there's lots of ways that you can get involved, from volunteering to taking action on policy issues. You can see all these opportunities at tnwf.org/get involved. Outside of our policy and conservation work, we also have several other programs. Many of y'all have probably heard about the Scholastic Clay Target program. It's offered to kids aged 9 all the way through college. They have the option of shooting in several different shooting disciplines, and there's currently about 1,700 kids participating across the state. Also, our Hunters for the Hungry program. It feeds Tennesseans by providing venison to hunger relief organizations. These deer are harvested by hunters and then given to processors, and through donations and different grants, we have money to pay those processors, and then the food is given to hunger relief organizations. Since 1998, there's been about 7.6 million meals served. And then that brings us to Hunting and Fishing Academy, and that's where I spend most of my time. If you look at the North American conservation model, it's a user-funded model, meaning that conservation dollars are generated through license sales and taxes on ammo and other outdoors equipment. So over the last 20 years, we've been losing hunters at a rate of about 30%. And what that means for conservation is there's just not as much funding there. So as a nation, kind of recognized that this decline was taking place, and that's why they developed programs like Hunting and Fishing Academy. We kind of mimic the generational transfer of knowledge, and through our one-on-one events and then our virtual classes like this. And not only are we teaching you how to harvest the game, but the entire process. So this is a little overview of what we're going to be covering tonight. For those of you that joined us on our first virtual series on turkey hunting, it's going to be a similar format as far as the pop-up surveys. What these are is just kind of helps me get a judge for how much experience you guys have and and kind of also where you're going to be hunting are going to be our two pop-up surveys for tonight. And then also we're going to cover finding places to hunt, how to locate turkeys once you've established a place to hunt, some of the equipment that you'll be using, and then a little bit more about the shotguns and shells. And then we'll get into some basic strategy for actually turkey hunting. So here's our first survey question. How many times have you turkey hunted going into this year? Wow, that's great. A bunch of new turkey hunters. Hopefully you guys will learn something here tonight. Here's another pop-up survey. Tennessee has a lot of great hunting opportunities on public property, and I'd just like to get a feel for which type of property you guys will primarily be hunting. Great, good mix across the board there. So I'm going to start out talking a little bit about how you can find public properties in Tennessee, public land. And what this is an actual screenshot of the interactive wildlife management area map. And this can be found at tn.gov on the TWRA's website. And then also on the Go Outdoors app, the TWRA's app, there's a place to find a place to hunt, and it'll carry you to this interactive map on your phone. And what it is, it's got all the wildlife management areas across the state on this map. You can zoom in, and it's actually got some, I noticed Natchez Trace on there, and it's also got the land between the lakes, and those aren't actually wildlife management areas, but they're still on this map, and you can still get some resources for those. So depending on where you are in the state, you can kind of pick an area in which you want to explore and possibly turkey hunt, zoom in on that wildlife management area. And then when you get zoomed in on it, so I picked Natchez Trace State Park here, and you zoom in on it, when you click, it's going to give you the option to get more information. So you can get general WMA regulations, or you can get that site specific wildlife or that WMA specific information. So if I was to click specific WMA information, it's going to carry me to basically a screenshot of the PDF form of the hunt and fishing guide. This is also found there. So it tells how many acres it is, the location, that's probably the manager's number there, and then when the season's open for the different stuff. Tennessee Valley Authority lands have a similar interactive map. You can see that link down below, and in our follow-up email after this, we'll be providing these links so you guys can just click those and find those resources. Other lands that come to mind, public properties that have turkeys on them in Tennessee, especially in the West, we have national wildlife refuges, and then also some of the state parks are open to hunting. And you'll just have to check on the regulations for each of those type areas. If you guys got any questions about just a general idea of finding wildlife management areas in the state, and any questions regarding public land, and then I'm going to dive deeper into how to actually locate turkeys on those lands.
Hey, Chris, we had a question from Garrett, who asked this pretty early on, but he says he's new to hunting in Tennessee, so this is all pretty new for him. And he was just wondering how public land works, which I think you described a good way to find public land. But he was some guys at work said he could hunt any land outside the city limits and any power line areas. He's asking, is this true? And he also mentioned, is all April turkey season quota only for public lands?
So I'll answer the first part. There is some hidden public properties out there that's not going to be considered wildlife management area. Some of it is TBA land. There's a bunch of stuff. You know, I've heard different things about right of ways and having permissions on stuff that maybe the city owns that they allow hunting, but that's all going to be something you're going to have to check on yourself. The wildlife management areas, the national wildlife refuges, the state parks, they're going to have publications out that tell you about the rules and regulations. And if there's anything that you need to know, like a non-toxic rule, and I'm going to cover that later on, but basically where you have to shoot non-toxic shot, or if there's a delayed open or something like that. But it's really dependent on the type of property. And then the second question, talking about quota on all public properties on quota, and that, no. So most of your wildlife management areas are going to be in line with statewide. They could have some rules where you can only harvest a couple of birds per wildlife management area. You'll just have to check on the independent regulations. But yeah, there is lots of public land hunting opportunities that is not quota. In other words, you would not have to have applied. You can just buy a wildlife management area permit, or like on a national wildlife refuge, sign your brochure, which acts as a permit. And there's a lot of opportunities out there like that.
And then we have Matthew. He has a similar type question. He says, where can you go to practice shooting?
So the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency has lots of ranges that you can go and shoot if you want to go that route. You know, when you're shooting a shotgun, the safety hazards is not there like you would be shooting a high-powered rifle. You find a good backdrop, you're only going to need to shoot 40 yards. So there's a lot of rural areas that would allow you to do that with some permissions and things like that. But there's definitely some ranges through the state that you can use. And maybe on our follow-up email, Taylor, if you could just make a note, we'll try to send out the best way to find those ranges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the hunting guide, there are different tier ranges all across the state that TWRA manages. Those are usually pretty accessible. You do have to have like a license, but it's not very expensive to use those ranges. But they're open usually all week, and most of them you just walk up to and use. But those are always a good option. And then William asked, can you use a TSS number 9 shot, which I think you're getting into shots or shell selection a little later on.
Yeah, I've got a whole slide kind of dedicated to different shot materials and things like that. But TSS and a 9 is legal. The only restriction we have in the state for statewide is it can't be larger than a 4 shot. So nothing on the high end. But there is some area specific differences like LBL, maybe Natchez trace. So make sure to check on each WMA and different state parks to make sure they don't have some kind of regulation that's going to influence the size shot that you can shoot.
And then Cody's asked, he was drawn for a quota hunt at Chuck Swan. Congratulations. What is the general procedure for checking in and beginning my hunt?
It's been a pretty good while since I've drawn a wildlife management area permit. I can't remember if you have to give a letter of intent or you mail in. I know some of the National Wildlife Refuge permits, you have to mail in and actually get your permit. But I think for statewide, you should have a huntable permit with your dates on there. Now, there might be some different regulations on that particular WMA as far as when you can access it to scout and things like that. But I believe that the permit that you received when you were drawn should suffice for you to be able to hunt. You just got to have the proper licenses and your wildlife management area permit.
And word of advice, if you ever have any questions about that, it's always best to contact that WMA manager. Their contact information can be found in the back of the hunting guide underneath that WMA. So if you ever have any questions about it, give them a call and they should be more than happy to help answer any questions you have.
All right, if that's all the questions we got on that, we'll dive right into locating turkeys on those public properties. So locating gobblers early in the morning as they gobble from the roost is probably the best way to locate turkeys. And this is something that can start happening tomorrow. Turkeys are starting to gobble now as to whether we've had some warm mornings here the last 2 or 3 days. And there's no doubt that a lot of these turkeys are starting to gobble early. About 30 minutes before sunrise, as you can start to kind of see around, and you'll hear the woods waking up. You'll hear different birds and crows start to holler and different things like that. And that's normally when the turkeys are going to start gobbling. And they'll gobble from around 30 minutes before sunrise to right at sunrise. And normally about a 30-minute span, even this early in the season, when they're going to gobble quite a bit and give away their location. So they're also at an elevated position in a tree. So that sound is carrying. And it's a good time for you to be able to locate turkeys. So in your scouting process, if you've got an idea of a certain wildlife management area, or just like the Chuck Swan example, you've got that hunt on certain dates, it's never too early to start scouting. Go over there and start looking. And this is a map. I just kind of threw this together, but it goes to show how you can use topography to your advantage for finding these turkeys. Sound's going to travel. You're going to hear better from higher elevations and kind of listening over these low grounds. And then hopefully the turkey is going to be in an elevated position. If he's on the side of a ridge with no kind of obstacle between you or him, it's amazing when on a calm morning, just how far you can hear. So what I like to do is I'll ride what I consider as hearing distance. So I look at it as if there was a turkey, if I can hear a half a mile, then I want to go a mile before I make my next stop and listen again. So that's a half-mile radius either way. I'm wanting to be as efficient as possible with my stops. So on this map, you can kind of see how I pick where I stop. Now, I'm normally not looking at an app with topo lines to really be specific on where I stop. You might could pre-mark some of these. That way, as you're driving through early in the morning, possibly even in the dark, you already kind of have an idea of where you're going to be stopping and listening from. But I can cover a lot of ground. So I'll pull up in the truck. You can see there on that one mark, I put a yellow line to where I might walk to the end of that ridge back to the east. And then similar on the other one where I walked to the end of the ridge back to the west and listened over that lake, and then made the loop and went back up. And hopefully, if there's a turkey anywhere in that area, at least I could hear a faint gobble and then maybe try to find a road or a walking trail that's going to get me closer, and I can pinpoint exactly where he is. And then I'm going to use my mapping apps, OnX or HuntStand or something like that, and I can drop a pin on where I think that turkey was roosted. And, that's invaluable information. So now you know where a gobbling turkey is when season gets here. And that turkey is not going to move, 2 or 3 miles. He's going to be somewhere around there when the season comes. And then if you want to look at it from like a private property standpoint, obviously, this is like a Natchez Trace example. It's 48,000 acres. You could ride and listen every mile for a month and not cover all the ground. But if you have let's say a 200-acre private parcel that you're going to be hunting, maybe you just split that up into 2 mornings of going and listening. So I might pull up on one side of the farm on my way to work, get out, kind of get away from the road where the traffic's not bothering my hearing, listen to that part of the farm, and then maybe the next morning go around and listen to the other. And the whole time I'm using my mapping apps and dropping pins on turkeys that's gobbling, or maybe even if I hear hens yelping, that's something worthy of noting, and putting on your map. And then if you hear a bird in the distance, you can always get closer and get more specific with your pins that you're dropping. So one thing you can use when you're out scouting like this, and even during turkey season, is what they call locator calls. And this is something that's mimicking a bird, or other, like coyote howlers is another locating call, but you're trying to trigger a shock gobble. And I covered this a little bit in the first virtual series, but what it is, there's different frequencies and there's different things that a turkey will react gobble to. And a lot of times on public land, I kind of steer away from locator calls like owls or crows, just because they have caught enough pressure, and they can make that association with a weird sounding owl or a weird sounding crow to know that that could be a human, and they might actually shut up gobbling. So a lot of my strategy is to just sit back, let the woods wake up, and then have the natural crows or the live crows hollering, and hopefully have a turkey gobble. Now, occasionally I've seen mornings where it's dead quiet, maybe it's a barometric pressure thing, or there's a big front coming in, and all the birds are quiet and it's just dead calm, and even the turkeys are quiet. Then that's a scenario when I would use an owl hoot or a crow call to try to break the monotony and the calmness and try to get one to gobble. And then an obvious way of locating turkeys is glassing them. Out in the western states, you can see so much further than most parts of Tennessee, but still on your wildlife management areas and even on private properties, if you see birds in a field, I would always mark those areas and add them to my information as far as where turkeys are. Especially on public land, you can, maybe it's a rainy day or something, you don't want to get wet, you don't want to go out in the woods, you can just ride around with your binoculars and try to catch one in the field and mark him, and then come back for him for future hunts. And then the last part on locating turkeys I want to cover is just the sign, and we covered a lot of this in the first virtual class, but this is real quickly scratchings again in the middle. You have some poop there on the side, and then also you've got some turkey tracks, and that's something that I'm always looking for, no matter whether I'm scouting or actually hunting. That I'm going to make a mental note. And then also on these hunting apps, you've got a way of actually dropping those signs. I know HuntStand has tracks and different things that you can actually mark, so you can remember where you see that stuff. So if you guys got any question on locating turkeys? Wow, I must have been pretty thorough on that part. I thought we would have some questions about that. So I'm going to jump into tools of the trade and a little bit about the clothing that you would wear when you're preparing for turkey hunting. So one of the main things, I like knee boots. And this is going to allow me, if I need to get down inside of a creek that's got water in it or something like that, and make a move and get closer to a turkey and stay out of sight, allows me to cross little ditches and things without getting my feet wet. And then another part of it is just the safety aspect of it. As it warms up in the spring, this is a time when snakes come out, and it can protect you from a snake bite, because you got coverage all the way up to your knee. My knee boots, I wear a type of lacrosse boot, and to be honest with you, I just soon wear them as any tennis shoe I own. And I put a lot of miles on them, and they can be really comfortable. So I don't want you to think you're getting burdened by having to wear a knee boot, because if you get the right one, an uninsulated boot, and they're very comfortable. Also, like I'll cover the pants. I've got 2 pairs of pants. I got one that's pretty thick for the cold mornings, and then I got one as you get up into late April and May. It's real lightweight, and they do better in the warm conditions. Shirts, there's a million different ones out there. I like a pocket on my chest up here, and a lot of times if I don't want to carry a vest, I'll just put a slate call and maybe a mouth call in my shirt pockets, my gloves in my pants, and I'll roll like that and stay pretty mobile and light, especially when it starts getting warm on up in late season. And then a very valuable tool is these turkey vests, and they've come a long ways, and you can see one pictured there. It's got a built-on cushion to get you comfortable when you're setting up on turkeys. And then the pockets are, for the most part, actually kind of custom made for different kinds of calls. Also face mask and gloves, because you want to be completely concealed. Unlike really with deer hunting and things like that, turkeys have such good eyes. You want to cover up all the different parts of your hand, get down on that gun where you're only showing your eyes, get a face mask that comes up to your nose, and you've got to be dead still. As one of my, the hunt master said last weekend, think still means different things to different people. Think statue. That's how still you got to be up until the time the birds get in range and you just make a real small movement to get on and make the shot. So this is a little bit more about what's inside a turkey vest. It's kind of like the bag of tricks of turkey hunting, and it's a way of being mobile and getting all your gear and keeping it together. But inside mine, I like to carry either a thermocell or bug spray or both. Depending on where I'm hunting. If I'm hunting in the Mississippi River bottom or river bottom where mosquitoes are real bad, I'll probably carry a thermocell. If I'm hunting more upland ground where the mosquitoes aren't quite as bad, I'll normally get by with bug spray. And then keep your mask and gloves in there. That way you always know where they're at. You see the cushion there that's attached and it's built onto the back. It'll really help you when you're having a set for a long time if a gobbler's kind of hung up and not wanting to cooperate. One thing I have added, I used to carry a compass, and it probably still isn't a bad idea, but these mapping apps have come so far and they're so dependable that I know as long as I'm keeping a charged phone, I'm going to be able to get myself in and out of the woods, and I'm gaining access to, like what we were talking about before, where you're marking different places, marking your sign, and stuff like that you just can't do with the compass. So I say put that portable phone charger. They're $10 at Walmart. You charge your phone on them twice, and if you did have to hunt all day or something, you'll be able to charge your phone. I put 2 decoys in mine, and you have to run some kind of a collapsible decoy just to be able to fit and be comfortable. There's some pretty realistic looking decoys that are still collapsible and mobile to fit in a turkey vest. So, and then another thing I carry that's kind of out of the ordinary of what you would think is garden shears. And these are the shears that you could prune rose bushes and stuff like that with. But what it'll allow you to do is you can cut a piece of cane or different leafy limbs up to about the size of your middle finger and be able to poke it down in front of you and use it for cover. So if you're going to be in one spot for a while, it's worth making that investment, going ahead and cutting a little bit of brush, getting it in front of you. And then also, you know, you can take a little bit of time, even if you have a turkey gobbling, before you've made your first call, and go ahead and try to get set up and use those for that. And then I keep my shells in there. That way I never get out in the middle of the woods, get ready to load a gun. And I hadn't got them because I had them in another pants pocket or something like that. And then back to the calls, I'll touch on the next slide just real quickly about the different kinds of calls. But these vests, you can see on this one where a box call would slide in the front. Most of them have a place for mouth calls where you can divide them up and they're not clicking together and making noise. And then also your striker and your slate call could go in front. And that's what we've got pictured here. our third part on the Turkey Hunting in Tennessee virtual series is going to be strictly on calling. So I'm not going to dive into the different kinds of calls and how to use them tonight, but I will run through what that is and kind of how you can store them as it relates in your vest. But those big kind of bulky calls are what's called a box call, and you got a custom pocket for it inside your vest. That push pin call normally can go inside one of the bigger compartments. And then most of the vests actually have striker holders. So what that round piece, it looks like one's slate and one's crystal, those are slate calls. And that striker is that pencil looking object that makes friction and makes noise on it. And you're able to store them separately to keep them from beating together. And then you can also see a small diaphragm call that would insert in your mouth. And there's pockets for them on that vest as well. So any questions on the tools, the clothing, and things like that before we dive deeper into equipment?
Yeah, Chris, we got a few questions from a few people. Two, one from Chris and one from somebody else, kind of the same one. But they ask, is camouflage necessary when it comes to turkey clothing? And what is the best all-around camo pattern for turkey? And maybe even deer, while we're talking about camo patterns.
Yeah, turkeys have a very good vision. They see in color. And I'm going to cover some tactics that involve ground blinds later on. And if you're going to hunt out of a ground blind, you can get by on dark colors like black. But for the run and gun style hunting, like we're going to cover in some of the first parts of this, it's very important to have a camo that matches your background. So early season, mossy oak bottomland, something like that, that's got dark tones. At that time, you don't have many leaves and not a lot of greenery would probably be a good fit. And then mossy oak obsession is what I've got two outfits in it as it starts to green up. That's got a lot of green and there's a lot of, Realtree, there's a lot of different camouflage manufacturers out there, but basically just look at it, think about how much green, how dark it is, how light it is, and think about what the spring woods is looking like at that stage of your hunt would be the best advice I could give you.
And then I have a question from Leandro. It says, can you cut branches or bushes in public land to build cover?
Different areas have different rules. You would make sure that, that wildlife management area or state park would allow it. I know sometimes you can use deadfall. So if there was a fallen tree or something that you're not having actually cut, you could move some of that brush. And there's ways of kind of getting around having to cut live trees, but each WMA and each public land is different. So make sure to consult your area manager and your trapping guide there.
And then Cody, this kind of goes back to locating turkeys, but he asked, what type of sign do you look for? Or what would you get more excited about, scat or tracks?
Well, tracks probably, just because it's going to tell more of a story for me. I can tell the size of a turkey. I can normally tell if it's a male or a hen, and maybe even the size of the male. If you've looked at them enough, you can tell what's a hen, which is you'll be able to tell right off compared to another one. And then once you get up into the larger tracks, when you see one, getting up with a middle toe about as long as your middle finger, then you're probably dealing with an adult male bird. So the tracks is going to tell more of a story than the scat.
And then William asked if any of us paint your Tom's decoy head solid white.
The heads of turkeys change as their hormones and their mood changed. I've watched a turkey come out kind of in a feeding pattern and then get excited and start gobbling, and his head go from a dull gray to a dark, bright red and white, like you're talking about. As far as custom painting, from what would come from the factory, I couldn't see much advantage to it, really.
And then Christopher asks if we have any recommendations for East Tennessee public land turkey hunting.
We'll try to put some stuff in the follow-up email, directing more towards different parts of the state. Being from West Tennessee, I'm not sure of the different options out there. The first would be how close you are to the different ones. So, I've always said this, my trade-off for driving 2 hours to an area that's better known for turkeys and only getting to do it once a week would not be my choice if I had one that's maybe not as productive as far as turkeys, but it's 20 minutes away and I can do it 3 times a week. So I can spend more time there scouting and I can get to know the land better. So without knowing much about East Tennessee hunting, and I could tell you the time that you spend scouting and picking an area and getting to know it would probably outweigh to me what I would know as abundance of turkeys on different ones. So hopefully that'll help you on making a decision, but we'll try to add some guides to the email for the follow-up.
And one thing we'll add as a link is to the TWRA's Hunter's Toolbox. So from there, you can see harvest from WMAs and by county. So that's a good tool to kind of see which WMAs have a more successful turkey harvest. It doesn't tell you how many people hunted that WMA, but you can see if a WMA produced a lot of turkeys the year previous or not. Then we got 2 more questions. Someone asked if you're allowed to use lighted knocks for bow hunting.
You'll have to consult the hunting and trapping guide there. I don't think Tennessee has a restriction on it, but I would make 100% sure before doing it. I believe that you can use lighted knocks in Tennessee.
And then Ryan asked if you recommend scouting in the evening. If so, what are you looking or listening for?
Similar to the mornings when the birds fly up in the evenings, which is normally right at last light, they are more prone to gobble probably than they are on the ground. Again, it just goes back to where they feel safe, and they're wanting to gobble up their hens for the next morning, get a location of where they're at. So definitely you can get some turkeys to gobble late in the evening. As far as mid-evening, you're going to be more just looking for sign and looking for actual turkeys. They will gobble definitely as the season gets on and we get longer and warmer days. But normally for scouting purposes, I would just go to the farm the last 30 minutes of daylight and try to roost one then. And I'll touch on it now. If you get a turkey to gobble after he's flew up in the evening, he's there. He's going to be in that tree or in that. They could tree hop a little bit through the night, but that turkey's going to be there for the next morning. And when we start diving deeper into our strategy for setting up on these turkeys, that's the best case scenario to know where a turkey is the evening before. So even though the odds of maybe striking one and locating one is not as good as it is in the morning, if you do get to, it's definitely going to help you the next morning. That's the time when you call the boss man, you say, I'm not going to be able to come in tomorrow and call in sick or something, because you want to go in there and hunt that turkey while you know where it's at.
And then April asked if turkeys tend to roost in specific types of trees, pines versus hardwoods, for example.
I think we got that question on part 1, and I hadn't seen where turkeys are making a big preference of a type of tree. I would say location more than the type of tree. So kind of on the sides of ridges are preferred. Over water is often preferred. So in West Tennessee, when you get to dealing with turkeys roosting over water, it winds up being cypress trees. I see turkeys roosting pine trees a lot, especially, like I hunt LBL, and that seems to be a preferred tree. It's maybe a little bit something different, provide some cover before the leaves are on the rest of the trees. And then I've always, for whatever reason, it stands out that it seems like they want to roost in beech trees. But again, it's because beech trees grow in steep terrain, and the turkeys are wanting to roost on the side of those ridges just to kind of help for extra protection from predators. Okay. That's all of our questions. We're going to dive into the actual shotguns and chokes. So the most common shotguns for turkey are 20 and 12 gauge. In recent years, people have went to smaller gauge guns just because of the advent of the more modern shells, and we're going to cover a little bit of that. And then also you want a turkey choke to put in that gun, whatever you decide on. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a denser pattern. Common constrictions for a 12 gauge are between about 650 and 670 for turkey, and then 20 is about 555 to 565. And what that equates to is an extra full. So that's one of the tightest constriction chokes you can have. And when I'm talking about constriction, this is a little diagram of it. So you can see what would be a cylinder choke, and you see where it's not constricted at all. The choke, the end of the barrel, is the same diameter as the rest of the barrel. So you can kind of see in that diagram the way that influences the pattern. And then you go up the chain all the way up to a full, where you can see it's necking down, it's choking that pattern down, funneling it through. And the general rule is the tighter the constriction, the tighter the pattern. And there's obviously a lot of things that play into that, but back to the constrictions and the extra full turkey chokes, you're somewhere right there in that mid range of, like I said, extra full constriction. And then other considerations is like shell length, and there's definitely trade-off of deciding on which length shell you're going to shoot. 2 3/4 loads in general are not going to have the recoil that a 3.5 inch load would, but in trade, you're giving up some velocity. And then oftentimes larger payloads are available in 3.5. But let's just say, for instance, you have a 2 ounce load of lead 5s in a 3 inch and a 2 ounce load of lead 5s in a 3.5 of the same brand. Normally you're going to have a couple 100 foot per second or 100 foot per second velocity difference by going to a 3.5. And then also you could go all the way up. I've seen 2.5 ounce loads in a 3.5, which is going to give you more pellets. So that's some of your trade-off there. And then the next decision you're going to be making when you're deciding on a shotgun shell, and this has really come a long ways, especially in the last 10 years, is talking about shot density and the different materials. So first, let's talk about toxic versus non-toxic. And what that is, we know lead is a toxic substance, and on some of your wildlife management areas and other public properties, you're required to shoot non-toxic shot. So you can't shoot lead. So something like heavy shot or tungsten would qualify as a non-toxic. Okay, and then another trade-off with lead versus something like tungsten is going to be your cost. So lead shells, you can buy lead shells for $1.50 a piece, pretty regular dollar. Most of your tungsten is going to be up closer to the $5 per shell range. But what you're getting when you go into tungsten, you're talking about the density of the shot. And you can see on this chart, you got 19 grams per cubic centimeter in tungsten compared to 11 grams per cubic centimeter in lead. And I'm going to try to explain this without getting too deep into the science behind it, but you're basically equates to kinetic energy. And what that is mass times velocity equals energy. So the best way I could put it is if you stand at 10, I say 20 foot out there, and you turn your back to me, and I throw a golf ball and I hit you in the back at the same speed, and then I throw a volleyball at the same speed and I hit you. The volleyball bigger, the golf ball smaller, the golf ball harder, the volleyball bigger and softer, but they weigh the same and they're moving the same speed. But you can see the difference in the impact that would have and which one would hurt worse. So when you're talking about range and how lethal a shot is, what it comes down to is that energy and penetration. So the tungsten is a little bit harder than lead and it's smaller pellets. So you normally get better penetration. And then an obvious trade-off here, if you think about 2 ounces of each, there's going to be more pellets. You can get by with smaller shot size because of that kinetic energy difference. So I could shoot a size 9, just like the question asked earlier, in a tungsten shot and have about the same kinetic energy as about a 5 in lead shot. So when I go to a size 9, I can have a lot more of those pellets in 1 2-ounce load, for instance. So what that's going to do is just going to give more pellets downrange and increase pattern density. And that's a little bit, you can see a little bit of a comparison chart of the size shot. And then also you just might note that heavy shot is something that's very popular, and it's a mixture of metals, and it falls somewhere around 13 grams per cubic centimeter. So if you're a math guy, you can kind of see that it's a little bit better than lead. It is non-toxic, but it's not quite as heavy and dense as tungsten is. And then we'll get into what actually pattern density means. So the general standard when you're testing out a shotgun for turkeys, and what most shell manufacturers are testing theirs at, is a 10-inch circle at 40 yards. And that's how many pellets get put in it. Like this, that target that you're looking at is probably a turkey's head, true to life. And then that outer area is a 10-inch circle. And when you're testing out your gun, shoot it off a rest. I recommend a lead sled, just because these loads, there's some recoil, especially if you're going to shoot several different shells and choke combinations. It would wear on you after a little while. So use a lead sled or something that's going to help with the recoil if you're going to shoot multiple times in a day. I do encourage you to try multiple chokes and different shells and see what shoots best through your gun. Every gun's different. We're also going to verify that the gun shoots true. So most people don't think of a shotgun as having to be sighted in, but there's some manufacturers that's known to shoot high or low or left or right. You just want to make sure that your gun is shooting on target. So 100 pellets in a 10-inch circle at 40 yards. Of course, that's dependent on your type of load and your type of size of shot and load size. But 100 pellets is a general rule when you're patterning shotguns. And then one tip I would give you is use a big target that you can get the whole pattern on it, and then save the target. Shoot a clean target every time you change chokes or change shells, and write on the target which shell it was, which choke it was, and the distance. And then when you're done shooting, you're going to be able to look at those targets and tell which one's going to be best for you to turkey hunt with. And then I'm going to get into where you aim on a turkey, and then I'll ask questions. There'll probably be some questions about all this. So I get asked a lot, where do you aim on a turkey? So with a shotgun, we're going to aim for the necking head. And what we want is we want to break that spinal column coming up into the head, and then actual pellets in the skull and the brain. It's going to dispatch a turkey quickly. And I think it's important to say, to get that head upright, you can look how big that makes your surface area when a turkey raises up compared to if it's got it behind its body or in strut or something like that. So you're wanting to give yourself as big a target as possible. When archery hunting, you can see the heart and lungs there, and that's basically where the wings meet the body. And you're just going to have to imagine at different angles how to pass that arrow through those vitals, whether it be straight on, maybe shooting just above the beard or something like that. And then I'll open it up for questions on the shotgun chokes and shells.
You must have explained that pretty well, Chris.
That's what I said. All right.
Oh,
Well, we'll move
here-
on into some strategy, and basically, I'm going to break this up into a couple different forms of hunting, and I'm going to start out by talking about mobile turkey hunting, is what I would call it. And this is where we're going to start our morning before daylight, whether it be from one of those places where we can hear a long ways and try to hear a turkey gobble and make a move and get closer to him and set up, or maybe we already have a general idea of where a turkey's going to be. And we might even go as far as to go put our decoys out, set up in the dark, and then just set back and see what winds up gobbling around us and things like that. If daylight comes and there's no turkeys gobble, you want to still make the most of your morning. There could be a situation where the turkeys just ain't gobbling that day, or that particular turkey isn't. So you can still set up and hopefully be successful. But the whole general idea is this is when we're talking about putting your vest on. You got the gear that we talked about earlier. We got a couple decoys, and we're going to be mobile. So when the turkey gobbles, we're going to him. All my friends would probably say that I'm very conservative when I'm moving on a turkey. I say, live to fight another day. So I don't want to bump that turkey and let him know I'm in the world until it's time to kill him. So when I say I'm moving in on a gobbling turkey, I want to use the terrain. If it's really greened up later on in the spring, you can get closer than you can like right now, obviously. But yeah, move as close as you can, hopefully get within 200 yards. Decoys are optional. Sometimes, things happen. You just can't get out there to put a decoy out. So you just got to set up and start your calling sequence. But that's the general idea of mobile turkey hunting. And I'm going to run through a scenario later on.
Before we move on, Chris, we got two questions kind of along ammos and shotguns. Brian asked if most shotguns for turkeys are pump or auto. I think it's pretty much 50-50. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it is. It's, you're not going to have a lot of repeat shots when you shoot. You obviously want to kill him in the first shot, who don't, but it's not going to be as important to have a follow-up shot. So for instance, I cut weight on my firearms that I turkey hunt with, and I've got 2 single shots that I carry. And I just reduce the weight down, and I actually shoot a 20 gauge and shoot that tungsten super steel. And what that TSS done was allowed me to go to a lesser gauge and even cut weight on what I carry. So I feel like I'm not at any disadvantage by having 1 shot.
And then William asks, with the ammo shortage, do you have any recommendations?
Man, it really is something right now that the nation's going through, and you just got to keep an eye out. Probably ordering online from some of these big manufacturers, or even going ahead and making orders through back order and letting it get filled. You might not get the exact ammo that you're wanting, unfortunately, right now. But I have been seeing quite a bit of ammo, turkey ammo around the West Tennessee area. As we get closer to the time, I'm sure people will be buying it up. But yeah, it'd be wise to go ahead and get you some ammo.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've been seeing more stores have some turkey ammunition. Like Chris said, it's not always the ammo that you want. It might not be the heavy shot or the TSS, but there are some available. So just check out any local sporting goods stores you have, hardware stores that might have it, or anything you have around you.
Yeah.
Then Chris asked, how much ammo would you take for 1 hunt?
Well, you can't kill but 1 a day, so you won't need but 1 shell, right? No, you definitely don't want to get in a situation where, and I've been down this road, where you have a turkey that you've missed, or possibly even a crippled turkey, and you run out of shells. So you always want to carry, 3 or 4 shells, I think would be adequate. And then another thing I might even say is, these shells are expensive, but you don't have to put 3 of them in the gun. You could have 1 tungsten super steel shell that's $5, and then as a follow-up shell, put 2 lead shells in behind it or something like that. So that's another option. But yeah, 3 or 4 shells, I think, would get you through a morning. I know we're going to get pretty tight on time, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the blind and decoy setup. And this is a great way to introduce kids to the outdoors. That's what our one-on-one mentored experience is through Hunt and Fishing Academy. This is kind of the setup we use when you're, another reason that you might use the blind is if you're on a small property and you don't have an option to do a lot of moving around on turkeys. You're just going to kind of be there. If they're there, they're there, and you can just set up and wait on them. One thing I will talk about, you can see in this picture, it's blacked out in the back. Very important. If you had those windows in the back open, what would happen is you move, they're going to catch that movement through the light. In other words, you're seeing all the way through it and they can see that. But if you black that back up and you just open the front, you can get away with a lot of movement compared to what you can out, just setting up against a tree. So that's why it's great for kids. Even it's so much more comfortable if you're going to be setting for a long period of time. You can put some chairs in there and even put a shooting stick up. Some other tips I would say, just make sure you tie that thing down. The winds get up in the spring real quickly. You can stake those blinds down to the hubs. You see this one, it's not brushed at all, and it's probably the biggest downfall of a turkey. And don't ask me why, but a turkey can leave a field in the evening, knowing good and well there's not a blind in that field, go fly up in a tree, fly back down the next morning, there's a blind there, and they pay it zero attention, especially if you got decoys out around it and stuff. They're oblivious to it. So don't feel like you got to go through a lot of effort of brushing it in and really getting it hid. It's just the way the turkeys are. They just don't pay much attention to the blinds, even stuck out in a field. And then I like to put my decoys about 20 yards away. If you were bow hunting, that's another thing about the blinds is if you're a bow hunter, this is a great way to start out, because you can get them decoys up 10 yards, face that gobbler towards the blind. So the gobbler, if a turkey comes into it, they're normally going to come to the face of that decoy, and you could have a 8 or 10 yard shot with your bow and be able to draw on them. So that's another big advantage to the blind and decoy setup. And then somewhere in between the mobile setup and the blind, the actual pop-up blind is something like this portable blind setup. And what this is just basically stakes with some netting. And you can put that up around you, and it'll help eliminate your movement from, let's just say, your chest down. So you can kind of get away with some more stuff if you're going to be setting for long periods of time. And this is another tool that you can stick in your vest and you can real quickly set it up. And then I'm going to dive in real quickly to one of the mobile hunting scenarios. So the way this is set up in my mind, so the truck mark is down there on the south end, and maybe you were doing what we had discussed on locating turkeys on public property, and you pulled up there and a turkey gobbles way up on that north side. So I'm going to put my vest on, I'm going to grab my gun, and I'm going to start out, and I'm going to try to get as close as I can. You see, I put that X up there as where I'm going to set up, and I chose that field just because of, especially if you're using decoys, you're going to have a clear shot, and the turkeys, hopefully, if they come out into that field, they're going to see your decoys come closer. And then just general turkey mannerisms in general, in the spring, they're wanting to go to these open areas and strut and show off for the ladies. And I'm a field hunter. I believe in the decoys and things like that. But on the other side of that, if you did have the opportunity, that turkey just stayed in the roost for a long time and it was a lot of foliage, you could try to get in between him and the field and eliminate as much ground as possible. So if he comes to the field, you're still going to get a shot at it. And then I'm going to run through another scenario, and then we'll open up for some questions. This is just a general blind hunting scenario. This is a situation where you either knew the turkey was there the evening before and you go in the dark and you put that blind up, or maybe it's another scenario where you don't have a very large property and you're just going to go in and set your blind. But you see the turkey roosted there to the north. Generally, if you're making a move in the dark and putting a blind up, you can get pretty close, especially if you do it really early and way before daylight. But you'll also notice the way, even though I did mention that they don't pay much attention to the blinds, I still like to put them up against a tree line for the simple reason that you have to get in and you have to exit that blind. And I don't want to take a chance of maybe bumping a turkey. So I would exit that blind, get in the woods, and then come back out. It looks like a road to the south, and you can walk that back to your truck. Let's take some questions on the different kind of methods of hunting and things like that, and then we'll finish up. I know we're running a little bit over.
I do have one question here, Chris. He or she asked, when walking in the dark, do you use a regular white light or a red one? Or maybe green for that matter?
You can use some different colored lights. You know, a lot of people talk about red as a way of walking in. I had one that went on my hat that I walked with a long time, but really, if you can get away with it, try to have your gear organized to where you know where it's at and try to get by without using any lights. And I know that sounds like that's impossible, but I've found that the more you walk without lights, the better at it you get. Your eyes almost get accustomed to walking like that. And I don't mean just getting adapted over a 20-minute period in the morning. I mean, if you do it as a habit and just try to, every time you can get by without using a light, don't use one, and your eyes really do get better at seeing in the dark. But with that being said, I don't know that there's going to be a difference between a small dim white light and a small red light as far as what turkeys can see. I will tell you that it's amazing what you can get by with way before daylight. And I mean, an hour before gobble time, I guess they're asleep. That's the only thing I can tell you, because I've got underneath turkeys that I didn't know was there, made a ton of racket, got set up, and then the turkeys gobble and act like they knew nothing. So you can get away with a lot as long as you do it real early and do it quietly. All
We have
right.
another question here, or it's not a question, but somebody says it's a great resource and appreciate us working late and appreciate all the hard work. Well, we appreciate you saying that, and thank y'all for all joining us. I know we gone a little over the hour, but we got a few more things Chris is going to cover. So
Yeah,
y'all stick with us.
I'll run through it right quick, and then we'll open up for any questions, and I'll stay on as long as anybody wants to ask anything, and I'll answer them. But I was just going to cover again what we got coming as far as the turkey season dates. So statewide, we've got the Young Sportsman coming up on the 27th, 28th, the main adult season starting April 3rd, running through May 16th. Again, we got a three turkey bearded bird limit, no more than one per day. And then our Mississippi Alluvial Valley unit, and then that South Central unit has got delayed open on them, so they won't be opening up till April 17th and runs through May 16th. You can only kill 2 birds in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley unit, but that don't mean that you can't kill that third bird. You just have to get out into the statewide portion. And then real quickly, I know we've got a ton of questions, and I'm sorry, I'm probably not as good about some of the rules and regulations as you know, some of the officers and the different managers would be. So make sure you always consult your hunting and trapping guide. In the back of it, you do have your area managers for different wildlife management areas and state parks, things like that. And then also remember that turkey are a big game animal and they have to be checked in. They have a new rule where you tag before you drag. You can use your mobile app to check that turkey in. You'll get a confirmation number after you do it. It's going to ask you for county, private, public. If it is public, probably what wildlife management area it was harvested on, and then a measurement of the spurs and the beard. Now, don't feel like you got to have, a tape measure and everything out there. It's really, this is a way of keeping up with the age structure and different things. But if you can just get a pretty good ballpark down to within, let's say, an 1/8 inch on your measurements, and then get that bird checked in before you leave the field, then you'll be good. Make sure you download that TWRA on the Go app, and it's a wealth of knowledge there. You can look back onto those interactive maps like I had earlier in the presentation. You're going to have some regulation stuff on there. You can purchase your licenses, and then obviously, like I said, checking in your harvest. Our upcoming virtual class, the third and final part of our turkey hunting in Tennessee virtual series, is going to be strictly on how to call turkeys. And it's probably going to be, hopefully, the most entertaining, and I think it's going to be my most enjoyable one to teach you guys. It's something I'm very passionate about. But yeah, learn the art of turkey calling. We're going to go through all the different calls and how to use them, when to use them, why one's better than others in different scenarios. And I look forward to seeing you guys there. The link to register for the How to Call Turkeys on March 16th will be on our follow-up email that you'll be receiving here in a couple of days. And that's it for tonight. If you guys got any questions, I'll stay on as long as you guys want to ask them.
Yeah. So we got a few questions here. We got two from April. Her first one is the 3 bird limit per spring season or spring fall together?
It's just the spring.
The fall turkey season, you have a bag limit of 1. And then her second question is, in way of safety wearing camo, do you have to wear orange to enter public land for turkey season?
There is no regulations that's gonna make you wear orange. There is some of those vests like we showed earlier in the presentation that actually have like orange that's built into it. So if you harvest a turkey and you're wanting to haul it out and you've got a big fan that's fanned out as you walk through the woods or something like that, you can cover it with an orange vest or an orange bag, but there's no rules regarding wearing orange during spring.
And then somebody asked, if you do get a bird, what do you do next? So you talked about a little bit about the checking it in through the app, but what would your next steps be after harvesting a bird?
Yeah, and maybe that's something I think I can add to the end of the turkey calling, because we do want to, give you the knowledge of the whole process, and maybe I can do a real brief turkey dressing, a virtual turkey dressing lesson, which would be one of its kind, I think. But so yeah, I was going to cover it on this one. A lot of people throw the bird over their shoulder, holding the legs, and kind of that way you're not having to haul it out of the woods completely. If you've got a turkey vest on, a lot of times you can take some stuff out or maybe fit it in with its feet hanging out one end, head out the other, and you can haul it back to the truck. And then I'll just plan on part 3 of our virtual series going into how to cut off the spurs or the legs and hip joints. What would be kept is like a remembrance and the trophy and the beard and the spurs and the fan, and then a little bit about how to dress a turkey and get the most out of the meat, which they're delicious. One of my favorite meals.
Yes. And then someone's asked if there are any specific apps for tracking.
What was the question?
Any specific apps for tracking? So I'm assuming like Onyx, Hunt Stand.
Apps. Okay. Yeah, Onyx, Hunt Stand, they both partnered with us. Each one has its own kind of user-friendly functions. I know that both are going to be able to drop things and put an actual icon of, let's say, tracks or feathers or dust bowls or a symbol of a turkey goblin. They've got blind icons, and either one is going to be able to do that. It really just comes down to preference. And then also either one will be able, with a paid prescription, will be able to get you property lines and property ownership as well. So.
And then Brenda asks, is a regular hunting license all you need, or do you have to purchase certain tags?
I haven't got my guide in front of me. You can consult that hunting and trapping guide, but there is, I think, a big game license and then also one that's specific to turkey. Is that correct, Taylor? Just
Looking at the hunting guide, of course, you have your hunting and fishing combination license, your type 001. Then you would need your, I believe it's covered under your annual big game gun, your type 009 for turkey. And then, of course, if you were hunting on public land, you would need your WMA permit as well.
if it is a wildlife management area. If it was a
Correct,
refuge or a park or something, maybe not. But yeah, that's what I see, a 001 and a 009.
And April asked, does the TWRA app have the ability to show your location on the map? I don't believe it does. Like we said, when it comes to that, the apps like Onyx or Hunt Stand, that's where they're really going to come in useful, because they put your location on the map and they show the boundaries of the wildlife management areas or the private land that you're on. So you know exactly where you are in regards to those property boundaries.
That's right. And I would encourage you to use the TWRA app as a big picture item, finding different WMAs. And then once you decide on one, that's when you're going to rely more on your mapping apps like Onyx and Hunt Stand and some of those like that, because they're going to be able to give you very similar things in the way of overlaying property ownership, public lands, and different things like that.
All right, I think that may be it, unless anybody have any last minute questions.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to having you back for the third part of our Turkey Hunting in Tennessee virtual series on March 16th. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email us. Our contact information will be on the email that follows up this. So thanks, guys.
All right, and we appreciate all the kind words everybody's been putting in the chat and the Q&A. If it wasn't for people like y'all, me and Chris would have less interesting jobs for sure. So we really appreciate all of y'all tuning in, and we hope to see you next week.
Thank you, guys.